Hi crafty friends, it's Donna here, and I have a card to share with you today that uses a decoupage technique of layering up different parts of the image. And while I've done that, I've also tackled the question of what do you do when an image has some really fine detailed work? How do you get around cutting that out? I'm going to work this card from the back forward, starting with a Paper Rose Studio card base and card front. I'm going to do some ink blending onto that card front, and so I'm marking off the edges with some washi tape. I'm being careful to line them up very straight, but also to go just off the edge so that I don't accidentally blend a very thin line on the edges. The colours I'm using today are Abandoned Coral and Worn Lipstick, and I'm trying to blend it darker at the bottom and then work towards a lighter fade at the top. I'm using Distress Oxides for this, which do layer up quite well, and I'm tapping off the extra oxide onto my mat, but then you also see me using my mat as an ink pad and picking that ink back up again to blend onto the card. I love seeing the crisp lines when you pull the tape back. Next, we're going to work on the image. Today's stamp is called Brooke's Bouquet from Paper Rose Studio, and it's one of a set of 3 stamps of different sized bouquets. This one is, I believe, the middle sized bouquet. I'm going to stamp this image twice now and again later. I'm stamping it onto the same white paper that I used for the background, and then cutting off a piece and re-stamping just the central flower because I want to do that separately and layer it a bit higher. Next, it's time to colour the flowers. Instead of doing lots of blending, this technique uses a lot of flicks to blend the colour. When my firstborn was in kindergarten, the teacher explained to me about how they develop with their writing skills and showed me how kids are better at drawing vertical lines than horizontal ones. And it was really obvious in the way that the children can draw beautiful long legs on their people and lovely straight vertical strokes on their letters. And that's to do with muscle development and just the way our muscles work. And I find that even as an adult, that's still holding true for me. I am better flicking vertically, either towards myself or away from my body. If you're someone that has trouble getting nice even flicks, this might be something you want to try. I'm going to jump in and out of the colouring, showing you how I colour just one of each of the shapes in this image. And there will, of course, as always, be lovely music by Darcy Lewis Music to listen to as you watch the colouring. You'll notice just how messy the outside of the image is starting to look. I'm going to cut this single flower out right on the lines, and so anything that happens outside of those lines is not going to show. And I find that starting my flicks outside of my area really helps me to get good control, and so that's what I'm doing. As I cut, I move the paper, but hold the scissors fairly still. Once the flower has been cut out, in order to make it look very professional and well cut, I'm going to go around the outside of the image with a Memento Tuxedo black marker. I always hold the marker with the main part of the pen towards the back of the image. That way, if I slip and accidentally scribble on my image, I've only drawn on the back, and this marker doesn't come through the paper. Next, I'm going to move on to colouring the main part of the image. But before I do that, I don't need to colour this flower because I already have one. But when I layer it up, it's possible that you'll be able to see a little bit of colour on the edge. And so I'm just taking my mid-range colour and giving a decent outline. That's certainly far enough that you'll never see further in than that. Top right, you can see a few experiments that I had with creating a reddish purple. Rather than choose a new colour, I'm just using the colours that were already on the image so that it'll end up looking perhaps a little more cohesive. In my early days of owning Copic markers, when I only had a handful, this was by necessity. Now I do it because I like the look. This image has some seriously teeny tiny stems. And there's no way that I could cut around those. And so when I'm doing the colouring, I'm just going to ignore those for now. I'm going to cut them off and add a third layer below this one that will contain those parts of the image. It's impossible to cut into all the little gaps between the flowers in the middle of the bouquet, and so I'm ignoring those. Then once I have it laid down on top of my background, I've chosen two markers that are a very good match to my background, and I'm just colouring those areas with Copic. It's never going to be noticeable. Anybody that wants to get their magnifying glass out and notice that and complain about it probably deserves a shop bought card. I'm too lazy to clean my stamp, and so you can see me here using a piece of clear acetate to keep the dirty stamp away from my clean card. I'm going to lay my background and the flowers in my stamp press just where I want them, and then put the stamp right on top of that, still above the acetate layer, and close the door. Then I can be sure that when I ink up my stamp and stamp it, it's going to be in exactly the right place. I'm only pressing down on the outside of this image because the middle will be covered, so I haven't worried about getting a good impression there. I'm just going to quickly cut this panel out using the Australian-sized stitched rectangles dies. choose to put your first layer up with some foam tape, you might like to outline all of the different leaves and the edges. I'm going to stick mine down straight, so that's not necessary. I just need to colour the parts of the image that I cut off because they were too fine. Once I have the image glued to the background, I'm going to use a ruler to find out where the edge of that pink background is, and once again fill that in with my Copic markers. Next, before I get too much height to this, I'm going to add my sentiment, which comes from a stamp set called All the Thanks Mini. Finally, the last flower is going to get popped up with some foam tape, and then I'm going to add a few details with my white gel pen. A little bit of black marker helps to hide any mistakes I made in the cutting, and the card is done. If you've enjoyed this process, or if you've enjoyed the music, or the style of the video and you'd like to come back for more, then feel free to press the subscribe button below. I'm going to leave you with some close-ups of the card, including one from an angle where you can see the height in the layering, as well as a little bit of my Japanese small plates collection, which I have to admit, over my time staying in Japan, is getting quite extensive. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and I'll catch up with you again really soon.